Good evening, and welcome to Public Affairs Public Access on Houston Media Source TV. I'm Gene Preuss with the League of Women Voters of Houston. Tonight, we're going to talk about two different things. We're going to talk about the recent Gun Buyback program that you may have heard of, that the city of Houston held down in 3rd Ward. Well, it was all part of a program called One Safe Houston that the city is running. Tonight, we'll be talking with Crystal Okorafor, who is Deputy Inspector General for the Office of Policing Reform and Accountability for the City of Houston, to talk about that gun buyback program and other projects that One Safe Houston is doing for the city to help try to keep our neighborhoods a little bit safer. We'll also be talking to League of Women Voters of Houston board member Jack Enright. Jack is directing the Rising Stars program. Now, you may have heard of Rising Stars. That's our signature program here at Houston's League of Women Voters. And it's for people who want to get more involved and who want some leadership training, want to learn more what the league does and what they can do and how they can participate more within the league. So we'll be talking with Jack tonight. And we'll also be talking with some former Rising Star members. So let's go ahead and get started and talk about One Safe Houston. Crystal Okorafor, you are Deputy Inspector General for the Office of Policing Reform and Accountability for the city. Can you explain what that office does?
Yes, so Mayor Turner created the Mayor's Task Force on Policing Reform after the murder of George Floyd. That group looked at the police department here in Houston, and they determined 104 recommendations that they thought needed to happen to make HPD an even better police agency. At that time, one of the recommendations was the creation of the Office of Policing Reform and Accountability. That's the office that I hold in my position, the Deputy Inspector General. In my office, we oversee the Independent Police Oversight Board. The board consists of 20 members of the community that review all internal affairs investigations involving police misconduct at HPD that are serious bodily injury, officer-involved shooting, in custody death, or use of force allegations. And so they review the investigation, decide if they agree or disagree. If they disagree, then they move forward with going up, escalating the case all the way up to Chief Benner, who ultimately has the call on it. Through my office, I also can do independent investigation. So if there's a situation that takes place and we would like to have an independent investigation outside of what HPD does in internal affairs, then I'm able to do that. And then also we oversee the Police Transparency Hub. That is a website that you can go on to file a police complaint or see the 5 different dashboards we have that are updated on the second day of every month. There's a dashboard on use of force. There's a dashboard on the general makeup of the Houston Police Department, traffic stops, cite and release, and then officer disciplinary action. And that's just general information there.
So it really is a response to calls for more and more accountability that we've been hearing in the past few years.
Absolutely. It's definitely a response to that because although Houston, I think I think we're like a big little city, you know what I mean? Like we have a large community feel. And so when things like George Floyd and so many others happened, we all kind of came together. And so no one's saying through my office or anyone in the mayor's team is saying that HPD is bad, because I think HPD is one of the best police departments, if not the best in the country. However, we can always improve. And part of that improving is rebuilding the trust in the community and also making sure that there's overwatch, because no one gets to do anything without somebody overseeing it.
Explain to us, what is One Safe Houston?
Yes. So One Safe Houston is a comprehensive, holistic approach that the mayor announced in February of this year. That is a program to combat the violent crime we're seeing here in Houston, but also throughout the country. And so it takes, originally it was $44 million, and now it's been increased because of the success we've seen to $53 million. Majority of the funds, only 30% of the funding is going to the Houston Police Department. The other 70% is going towards holistic. It goes to mental health, domestic violence, community engagement pieces, and things like that. Because we realize that we can give a lot of money to the police department and they're able to do a lot of things, but we're relying on the police to do things that are outside of their scope. So we're giving almost $23 million towards mental health initiatives. Those mental health initiatives are allowing so that officers aren't going out to those scenes where there's a mental health crisis coming. So instead of sending an officer, they're sending out mental health clinicians. And since the beginning of this year, in the first quarter, they have responded to over 1,000 calls in which HPD and the fire department don't have to go to. And so it's really seen success. We're also increasing officer overtime. There's 125 officers that are out patrolling the area to help decrease the crime and not just move it, because we're looking at where the crime is happening and putting those officers where they need to be, and they're constantly in a rotation.
And it also looks like there's putting a lot of investment into quite other things, increasing the number of park rangers. I didn't even know we had that in the city of Houston. Community Reentry Network Program. What is that?
So that is an awesome program. I didn't know as much about it, but when I first found out, I went to a graduation last month, and it is an opportunity for people that have been a part of the system, a part of the criminal justice system. They get all of the resources and information they need to be successful. So then they get opportunities for education. They learn about helping them find jobs, getting them housing, shelter, whatever they might need. And as they go through the program, they're able to graduate. They got jobs and things like that. They've gotten them, different training that's needed. And so that program has been around for quite some time, and we've seen great success in making sure that those people that go through the program, their recidivism rate, it's dramatically lower than that of the rest of the country and the city. And so it's being increased from 500 to 750. And then that's supervised by the Houston Health Department. They're also going to be starting a crisis response or crime interruption policy. And so they're going to be doing that to stop crime before it starts. And so they're getting people that are already in the community to go ahead and assist in helping combat the crime.
Now, I know in our area, our local city council person has talked about shot sound or
shot spotter.
That's very innovative and kind of forward thinking, I think, is that you're listening for gunshots, right?
Absolutely. So ShotSpotter is very, very expensive. And so they did a pilot program. It was super successful. And so then now they're trying to increase the amount that we have here in the city. And that just goes back to the technology pieces that are part of One Safe Houston. We know that crime is rising. And when we have a small agency in HPD. I mean, it's a large agency, but it's a small agency for the geographic area and the amount of officers that they have. And so the technology advances is helping HPD do an even better job. And so we've got the shot spotter, we've got license plate readers. We're looking into cameras and providing different tools, because the more technology we use, then the more that we can help HPD to solve crimes faster and also hopefully prevent crime from happening.
One thing that has gotten a lot of attention recently with the newly passed legislation that's come out of Washington, D.C., the so-called boyfriend loophole. Now, I see that there's what's called a DART program, and they're looking at response for domestic abuse.
Absolutely. We've seen an increase in domestic violence, almost 40% throughout COVID, because, for a multitude of reasons. And so this is an investment because it's so important to the mayor to get those numbers down and get those people the resources they need. And so that $10 million is going towards officers getting more training so that they're working around the clock, so that those domestic violence officers that have that specialized training and the social workers, they're able to go to those scenes more often. It also gave more victim services advocates to work at HPD. We're also going to be able to do forensic examinations at the scenes. So that means that people don't have to go to hospitals to have those examinations if there's injuries or things like that. And that's critical for the prosecution of those cases, because if we have a medical person there, then they are able to testify to the injuries and what they observed and what they heard, in case for whatever reason the victim is no longer available to testify if they choose not to or whatever. And those type of cases, it's super important. Also, because there are a shortage of beds for people that are victims of domestic violence, that we're also going to be able to provide housing. And that first 72 hours between when someone calls the police is the most critical time. That is when you're going to see the largest increase in violence and homicides in that first 72 hours. And so now we're able to provide housing for those individuals, thanks to the American Response Recovery Plan funding for those individuals at hotels, where individuals at the hotel also had training.
One of the other things that people have complained about over the years is the slow progress, and I guess the backlog in forensic investigation. And it looks like money is being allocated to help improve that as well. What is the backlog?
The backlog it's massive. And so there's approximately $3 million towards overtime working. It's for additional equipment and things like that, hiring additional staff, because we have seen such a backlog because the criminal justice system came to a screeching halt with COVID. There weren't trials, there weren't things going on. And so, but then we see the increase in crime. So the cases are stacking, the crime is increasing, and we still have the small lab that's trying to take care of everything. And with COVID, they had limited resources when they could come in and things like that. Now we're back running full steam ahead, but during COVID and the height of it, they weren't able to be in there working as quickly and as fastly as they possibly could have. And so we're trying to decrease that backlog.
And finally, it looks like there is some money set aside for a gun buyback program. And that's an interesting project that I know a lot of other big cities have done. What is Houston hoping to gain from this?
We're hoping to allow people a way to dispose of their weapons in a safe manner. Maybe you have a gun that you no longer want, or you've inherited a gun and you want to make sure that it doesn't get into the wrong hands. Last year alone, there were over 3,600 guns stolen out of people's vehicles. So it's a matter of, we need to make sure that we are actively placing those guns into safes and things like that. But also, if you don't want the gun, no one's saying you have to give the gun away, but if you don't want it, here's a way that you can get rid of your gun and you don't have to worry about it becoming used in a crime. It's getting it out of the hands of children or people of that nature that would be able to use those weapons in a crime. That Gun Buyback program is happening on July 30th at Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church. It's in conjunction with Commissioner Rodney Ellis and the Houston Police Department in Wheeler Avenue. And it's going to be a drive-through line. So you would place the weapon in the back of your trunk. The HPD officer is going to come to the scene, to the first stop. They'll meet you there. They'll take the gun out of the trunk. They'll clear it, make sure that it's rendered safe and that it's not going to be used. And then you'll go to the next stop. At the next stop, they'll determine a value for the weapon. And then at the next stop, you'll get your gift card and drive off. And so it's a quick 1, 2, 3. At no point in time will we be asking any information about where you purchased the gun, if it's your gun or anything like that. It's completely anonymous. There won't be any law enforcement there trying to, watch your license plate or anything like that. It's just to take these guns, and we're going to, after they have been checked, to make sure that they aren't stolen or anything like that, or weren't used in any weapons, they'll be destroyed. And so it's a safe way for people to get rid of their guns, and it's just getting additional guns off the street.
I am impressed by the responsiveness to so many issues that we see, not only in Houston, but in other cities too, for more transparency, more community involvement with the police department and efforts just to reduce crime in general.
Absolutely. And we are excited about what we have seen in the past 5 months now. We've seen homicides go from above 30% from last year to teeter-totting a little below or right at the same as the year before. So we're seeing success. Obviously, one death is way too many, but we are excited about what we're seeing. And we're excited that it's a community program. It's not just what HPD can do to make us safe. How can we all work together as part of this community to make it safe for all of Houston?
Well, Crystal at Cohort 4, I want to thank you so much for your time and for the efforts that you're doing with One Safe Houston.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
We recorded this segment with Crystal at Cohort 4 a few weeks ago, and the Gun Buyback program had not happened as of the time that we recorded it, and it has happened since then. It was successful, brought in almost 850 guns. So look for another one in the future. Now let's turn our attention to Houston's League of Women Voters signature involvement program. That's Rising Stars. Jack Enright, chair of League of Women Voters of Houston's Rising Star program. Thank you for being with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gene.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the Rising Stars program.
Sure. So Rising Stars is a program that we have here with League of Women Voters of Houston. We have a group of usually about a dozen or so people. A lot of them are young, but we've actually expanded it to people of any age, just trying to get involved here in the Houston community, doing certain projects. We'll usually do 2 or 3 projects throughout the years, and goes throughout basically our fiscal year. So in this case, it'll be usually between September to August of the following year. So it's something I've been a part of the past year, and that what we call a cohort. And it's something I'm going to be leading this year. So we're kind of in that transition phase of kind of winding down the previous cohort and getting the next one started. So that's something I've been trying to work on gradually, getting new folks in for the next year, and hopefully by actually about a month from now, August 25th, we'll have that cohort selected and we'll kind of hit the ground running from there.
All right. So as you mentioned, you were in a previous Rising Stars cohort. So tell us in Rising Stars what exactly we do here at the League of Women Voters of Houston.
Yeah, so there are a few things we do. So of course, one of them is voter services, getting people out to vote. We have the recruitment efforts there. Some of it is civic engagement. We have the advocacy day. We'll go and do things at the state level in Austin for a particular issue and a nonpartisan level. So just really a lot of things like that, where it's nonpartisan activism, just getting word out on certain issues, or just getting people registered to vote, things like that, and just making community a better place overall.
And what was your experience in Rising Stars? What did you do? Because I know when you were going through each participant had a project. So what were you involved with?
So there were a few things we did. One major project was looking at the Houston area and certain zip codes where there was low voter turnout. So that's what we were really focused on, was getting more people out to vote and trying to find the best ways to do that. So we're looking at certain zip codes where the fewest people turned out and trying to identify not only where those locations were in those zip code numbers, but also why they didn't turn out. And so first of all, I was looking at census data of certain points and looking at certain areas that were lower, then also reaching out to community members in those areas and identifying why that might have been. So that was something I did, especially early on in the data part, looking at those numbers. You had huge spreadsheets of numbers and trying to whittle it down to certain precincts and seeing which zip codes they were in. Then also looking at kind of beyond that to identifying community leaders in those areas, and that was something that some of the other cohort members did, really just interviewing them, seeing what might have been the issue there, and really getting those people fired up and out to vote.
So in each cohort, the projects that you choose are your own, right? You and maybe a group of people identify a problem that aligns with something the league is interested in doing, like promoting voter registration in that case, identifying areas where there isn't as much turnout maybe as expected, and then trying to find things to address those issues. So if somebody's listening to what you're saying, well, I'm not a data cruncher, I'm not, this, there's always room for whatever talent you possess, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are a lot of different tasks within a project that go into it. Some of it is working more with people, interviewing them, or it could just be getting out like a voter registration table, or it could be some other cohorts. For example, I think actually the past year they did some with flood mitigation. They've done some with criminal justice. So there's really kind of a broad swath of topics that we address, and it just depends on who's there and what they want to do. And I think there's a role for everybody, regardless of the project. Just we can identify the talents they have, what they bring to the table, and then really use that to do good.
And the whole goal, and I think, as you mentioned earlier, is leadership development within the league, correct?
Yes, I think so. So I think that's something that you can really do first of all, over the course of that cohort year, but then also moving forwards, like myself and actually one other member of the current cohort moved into the board of directors for this upcoming year. So I think there's a lot of growth potential like that too, where you can kind of get your feet wet a little bit with the Rising Stars cohort, and then move on either within the league like we have, or possibly other organizations. And just in general, I think just getting that experience working with people and working on projects, I think, and learning a lot from that, I think is really beneficial.
I think one of the things that surprises people about the league, and I've heard from Rising Star participants, is that the League of Women Voters, and certainly the one here in Houston, kind of has this, people think, well, you're about voting rights, you're about women, that you're about issues related to women, or that, you do voters guides, and we do the voters guides or debates and interviews with the candidates, conversations with the candidates. But there really is a lot more to the league. And is that something you explore during your time in Rising Stars?
I think to some extent it is, because I think just, like I said, there's a lot of different facets to it. We have, like, some of it is even fundraising, so we're doing some of that coming up here soon, even doing like silent auctions and things like that. So there are a lot of different facets to it. So I think it's just like any nonprofit. There's like the activism part, there's the fundraising part, there's kind of like the recruitment part, working with people, and of course, like I said, sometimes working with data, with money and logistics. And so I think just like any other nonprofit, I think there's a lot of facets to it. And so there's always something to do and something to use your talents on, like we've said before. So I think that's something that we've definitely seen here and there over the course of this past year.
What do you think was when you were involved in Rising Stars, what do you think was the most, the biggest epiphany that you had, or the biggest aha moment that you had?
So I think probably over the course of the year, at least for me, early on, had a little bit more time now when I was kind of between jobs. And so I was able to do some work with redistricting. Actually, it was had a map proposal that I submitted, and that was displayed at certain voting locations by the county, across the county, and even in the Houston Chronicle. So I think that was really cool to see my name and map that I had drawn on there. So something like that, I think that was really cool. And also just having time to just kind of spend around with other cohort members and see each other in person, I think was really great. I think it's something that maybe we could have even done more since we did a lot of Zoom still. But I think especially this upcoming year, now hopefully COVID is winding down a little bit. So we'll see how that goes. But I think having more in person, being able to socialize and see people. That's one thing I've learned and that I'm really looking forward to being able to do more.
I think that's a big point. Is that the past 2 years, because of COVID, we've barely been kind of isolated and kind of siloed in our own structures, and not really been able to see one another and interact. And as human beings, we're social creatures. We like that, and that's one of the neat things about the league, is that you see that you're part of something bigger, and that you share some of the same interests with other people that you may not normally know about or get to interact with, and sometimes you bring your friends along, and sometimes you make new friends, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's kind of a good group. Sometimes I think kind of the word of mouth advertising, I think, is really helpful too. But just meeting new people, that's been really nice for me, that I can see people who have similar interests to me, who want to get involved in the community. So that's been something that's really great. And initially, early on, we met, for example, at Pearl Bar, and were able to see the old cohort and new cohort, all in person. And so just could talk to them about their experiences, and kind of in a nice social setting. So I think that was really cool. And I think that's something that we'll do a lot more next year as well.
So let's talk about the application process. Well, first of all, what is the type of person who would get involved and would do well in the Rising Stars program? Who are the people we're targeting?
So I think it's somebody who's doesn't need to have a whole lot of free time or anything, even if they're busy. I think just maybe about 5 hours or so a week is fine. It's somebody really who's just really motivated, who wants to get on the community. There's really, I think, a lot of infinite possibilities as far as what specifically they do, and we'll figure that out early on and identify it and go from there. But I think someone who's really just motivated, who's willing to work hard, even if they don't only have a few hours a week, I think is fine. But the main thing is just consistency too. Something that we've seen in the past year. Some people kind of flake out throughout the course of that year. So someone who's really motivated and consistent, who's willing to commit to it for the full year. I think that's kind of a nutshell what we're looking for.
Is there a certain age range or a level of professionalism that someone has to attain before they can apply?
So there's actually not. It used to be that it was below the age of 40, and now it's actually expanded to any age. So historically, it's been a little bit more of the younger crowd, but I think it can be either way. And I think it might actually be better to have kind of that diversity of age range too. Some people that are more younger and ready to kind of get out there and learn a lot more, and some that might be older, and some may have more experience in that thing, and maybe can share some experiences too. So I think that's maybe good even to have a balance of age ranges, and as well as other factors too. I think just having that more kind of diverse cohort to learn from one another's experiences, I think, would be great too.
I think one of the big questions that people have too, as we're talking about, different age ranges, you don't have to be, have a specific job title or come from a specific background. But the big question is, what's the cost? How much does this cost to participate in the Rising Stars program?
So there's actually no cost to participate, and you do not have to be a League of Women Voters member. Optionally, it is $95. You can join for a year if you wish, but it's not required. So yeah, you don't have to worry about that. You can just go and apply it, then we'll take you into consideration.
Well, we hope you'll join, right? We hope we get you to go through the program and then join if you're not already a member.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, yeah, it's great if you can get involved, chip in a little bit. And look, I actually don't have the application on the website quite yet, but I'm looking to do that, especially this weekend. I'll look into that, so you can definitely check back, and I'll get that running. And like I said, we're looking to get it by August 25th. We'll have a event. We'll looking to recruit everybody by then.
And what do they need to do? Do they need letters of recommendation? Do they, what is it that you're looking for people to bring when they apply?
So you don't really need letters. I don't have the official application out quite yet, but Usually it's not quite that deep. Usually it's just a few questions as far as why you want to join, what experience do you bring to the table, some of your background as far as what you've done in the past that's similar, or just and what kind of motivates you to get into it. So usually it's not too in depth as far as that goes. As far as like having to ask somebody for a letter and all fancy, kind of like a job interview. It's a little bit more casual than that, and not too involved, but enough to where you can kind of get a good gauge of how well you do at it.
Well, it sounds pretty straightforward and like a great opportunity for a lot of people who want to explore their own community and look at ways of interacting. And voting is power, folks. The other issue that we kind of skip over, and here it's the League of Women Voters, right? We're Houston League of Women Voters, and we're two guys, right? We're two men that are involved, and that's the big thing. And you were talking about diversity in membership. It's not just because it's the League of Women Voters doesn't mean that only women can participate.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a good point too, just kind of with the name. I think like compared like the NAACP, it's open to any race or color, and we're open to any sex or gender identity. So I think things like that are good to point out too, just having that good broad coalition of people, and understanding the history of why it had, of course, women with suffrage, but really just being open to everybody, I think is great, and just learning from one another is something that's important, but not kind of putting ourselves in a box, and making sure that everybody knows that, oh, hey, this is open to anyone.
And one of the other things that I think, the Rising Stars is actually kind of a Houston League's signature program, and not all other leagues in Texas or even the United States have a Rising Stars program, and it's something we're very proud of. It's not uncommon to have people who are members of other organizations and have participated with other groups to join the league, right? So it's not just as you mentioned earlier, it's not just a League of Women Voters only requirement to get in.
Yeah, I think so. So I think kind of dabbling in multiple organizations is great. So actually just saw an email the other day where there was a similar program to Rising Stars, and some people were saying, oh, well, that might be a competitor. But I think on the other side of that coin, it's like, oh, well, we could actually work together, and there could be mutual benefits to working together. So I think with things like that, that's something I've seen in the past with some leading similar organizations and being part of similar organizations. Usually they can help each other out rather than competing against each other.
I mean, we're kind of with many other groups. So you mentioned the NAACP, and we've worked with groups like LULAC and others. Mi Familia Vota has been very active with the league. Our participation, our cooperation with Mi Familia Vota, and these other groups. So that's a great point that you bring out, that there is a lot of other overlap. So in your experience and with the cohort that you had, did there seem to be people who joined Rising Stars and participated who actually were bringing in experience from other groups and helping to grow the program in that way?
I think so. As far as some of the groups we're trying to work with, for example, we were trying to set up tables, might have been like or U of H or community colleges. Maybe they had a leadership position there already, so they can work with them, or it could be other organizations we try to partner with. There's like Houston in Action, and there are some contacts that a couple of our members already knew, so they were able to talk with them and get things going. So that's definitely plus, having in with other groups and being involved with other groups and being able to work together rather than just being a kind of bubble, I think is a big advantage.
So let's talk about something that people can expect. So you mentioned earlier that there is a time commitment, that you want like 5 hours a week. Is it a classroom setting, or once somebody applies and they're accepted into the Rising Star program, what can they expect on a day-to-day, week-to-week, a month-to-month basis?
Yeah, so we'll look to meet at least once a month and probably twice a month just to kind of check in and see what we need to change and start doing and stop doing. But for the most part, I think we'll have usually 2 or 3 groups. We'll have different projects that we'll work on. And so really it's just kind of checking in, seeing, depending on what part of the year it is and what part of the project you're in, how it's going so far, what needs to be done. So it's really kind of open-ended, depending on your group, just identifying what the best solution is for that project. But I think it's really open-ended that you can, if you find something in the community that needs to be done, then you can really go out and do that, and you'll have the people power to do it, and you can even get the funding to do it. So there's really a lot of potential, I think, for this upcoming year.
So how many people are in the cohort?
So this past year we had 15, and a few of those kind of faded out a little bit over time, but we had several who stuck with it through, and we had some good output as far as the voter registration thing. One thing we have noticed, though, is that it's kind of bounced around over time. So we've had some cohorts that did a lot more output than others. This past year, we haven't had nearly as much as we did the past year. So I think another challenge that I've had is just kind of identifying over I think it's about 10 years or so that we've had the Rising Stars program, and seeing what's gone well, what's not gone well. We've actually had another project too, is we had another cohort member from this year interview or just send out an email questionnaire from any of the past cohort members, seeing what they liked, what they didn't like, and improving it, kind of moving forward and taking that into consideration. So that's kind of a big challenge I've had, and I'm going to have for the next month, is really digesting all that and putting it to good use for the future and for this year, and really learning from it and making the cohort for this year the best it can be.
Well, it's kind of interesting because it sounds like, and from what I've heard from previous Rising Star participants, is that no 2 cohorts, no 2 years are the same, right? Because you're bringing in different personalities, there's different dynamics, there's different interests, there's different concerns, there's different projects. So it sounds like it's a very dynamic program, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, it's really all going to depend on the people that are in it and what they make of it. So naturally, it's going to change a little bit. It has been pretty fluctuating, but I think this upcoming year we have a lot of advantages. I think now that I'm on the board and I can see this past year, there's a little bit kind of a disconnect between the two, between the cohort and the board. So I think bringing that a little bit closer together, working together with them, but also, like I said, working with other organizations and individuals, I think will be really great. So I think there's just a ton of potential, and I'm really excited for it. But I'm also realize that, oh, hey, there's kind of, it's like crunch time now. A little bit less than a month to go, and I need to recruit a dozen people or so that I think would be really good, and identify those people and get that application process going. So there's a lot of work to do, but I think there's tremendous potential, like I've said as well.
Well, it sounds like a fascinating program, and I'm excited about the way you've opened it up to different age groups and made it a little bit more welcoming. Well, not to say that it wasn't before, but welcoming to people who say, "Well, I'm too old for that." It's like, no, you're not. You're, any age group who really wants to get involved, learn more about the league and what we do and the services for voter registration that we provide. I mean, we do so much. Listen to the board meeting. There's people doing voter registration. There's people doing at citizenship initiations, or whatever you call them, when people become citizens of the United States. We often table there. We're working with schools. You mentioned University of Houston schools, but we're also working in some high schools and whatnot to get students as they turn 18 and they get ready to graduate to vote. We do debates. We do meetings. There's so much that the league here in Houston alone does, and we have various issues and various topics that we work on. It's voting, but it's also other issues related to voting. and so it's an exciting thing to learn about. That it's really a big organization.
Yeah, it really is. So like we said before, I think it's so much you can do with it, and so much you can contribute, regardless of what your talents are or how much time you have. For the most part, I think there's really a lot of potential, and so that, yeah, we just really dabble in a whole lot of things here and there. And I think, especially being now a part of a board and seeing how it's what we've talked about so far, I think there's really a lot of potential too with some funding coming in and things like that. I think, and just interest from a lot of people. I think there's super big potential, and so I think this upcoming year will be really great for us, and really, especially like I said, frankly, I think post-COVID, I think it'll be kind of like the turning year where we really bounce back and really just kind of shoot for the stars.
Begin for the next cohort of Rising Stars?
So that's something I'll do within the next probably week or so. So right now it's of course the end of July. So something I'm looking to get basically as soon as possible, as soon as I can get that application going. So that's something I'll work on the rest of this weekend and going into beginning of August. So I'll have it from then until right before August 25th. I'll probably set an official date, but we'll have an event where we'll have just like I said, with last year, we had the new and old Rising Stars together, and we'll have a little bit of fundraiser as well. So we'll get that going, and within that about 3-week period, I'll try to get some applications in, and I'll ask a lot for referrals too from anybody who's either listening to this or on the board or in one of the current or previous cohorts. Anybody they know that said that can maybe say, oh, hey, this person would be good, then I'll take them into consideration as well, and have had some interest already. So really just kind of getting that application pool together and going from there, I think is what we're going to do the next few weeks.
lwvhouston.org. I guess our Facebook page, LWV Houston, and various other areas. Any other places where they can look for more information, or if they can contact you or somebody else, what's the best route to go for more information about the upcoming Rising Stars program?
Yes, I think both of those are good. I'll definitely try to get that on our social media posted too very shortly, and on the website, like you said, that's how I saw it actually originally. Just coming from here, and actually just heard about League of Women Voters and searched through it, and I saw Rising Stars on the website. So that's how I actually got involved in the first place. So definitely check that. You can also email me. It's jack@enright.com if you're interested, and I can discuss it with you if you have any questions, and send you the application link once you get it. So either of those ways I think would work, and hope you apply.
Well, very good. Sounds exciting, and we hope to hear from you throughout the coming year, and maybe some of the Rising Star cohort members to come and be on the show, share with us what they're planning, what they're working on, what they're experiencing as the program evolves this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree, Gene.
Well, thank you again very much for your time, and we look forward to the Rising Stars cohort this year.
And thanks so much for having me as well.
And now let's look at some of the Rising Stars from this past year's cohort. Tonight we're going to hear from Catherine Colbert, Lourdes Zavaleta, Tanya Richardson, Daniel Meza, and Catherine Summerlin. So first of all, let's find out a little bit about each of the members. First of all, Tanya, would you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
I was born in Phoenix, Arizona, and grew up in Virginia, Tennessee, and ended up going to school at Vanderbilt and Purdue for graduate school in geology and geophysics, of all things. I ended up in oil and gas industry and have been working for Chevron for about the past 10 years. And it's kind of bounced me around a little bit from Indiana to Louisiana, and I've been in Houston for about 3 years now.
Okay. And what got you interested in the League of Women Voters in the first place?
Yeah. Well, I think like a lot of the country last year, there was a bunch of excitement about the upcoming presidential election. And I was personally feeling some of this anxiety in addition to the pandemic and really wanted to get out there and do something. So when it came to kind of voting rights, I got a little more involved and started reading on that, particularly around how people can be excluded from certain voting locations and how, we need to get the voice of everyone who can out there. So I literally started looking around for different opportunities and immediately found the League of Women Voters of Houston and saw that they were doing a lot of voter registration, ended up becoming a VDVR right away, and then was out at some locations for voter registration, and that cascaded into some online Twitter monitoring in order to capture people's questions and address them, and ended up on election day out at the polls monitoring some locations outside of the polls to make sure that there was no acts of injustice going on anywhere, that we could call a hotline and help out. So that kind of got me kicked off in the league. And after that, I was just looking for more engagement and found the Rising Stars program on the league website and thought, that would be a good way to just get better exposure to the local issues and to start getting involved in building out my network. So that's kind of how I ended up in the Rising Stars.
Okay, Daniel, let me switch over to you and ask you the same thing. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. And, thanks for this time. So my name is Daniel. I'm son of immigrant parents. I was born in Houston, raised in Spring, which is just north of Houston. I'm a first generation college graduate. I graduated from U of H in political science. And I first started working in civic engagement with an organization called Mi Familia Vota, which kind of focus on the Latinx Hispanic community, the youth, trying to get more people registered and active in our elections locally and nationally. And that was back in 2014. And since then, I've worked for another nonprofit called Baker Ripley, which is a pretty big nonprofit here in Texas. They have several community centers where they also, besides focusing on getting people connected to resources, they also focus on getting people more civically engaged, get them registered to vote. They do leadership training for people in the community. And I first heard of the League of Women Voters just kind of in passing when I first began with Mi Familia Vota and also with Baker Ripley. They were always kind of just, I'd see them at different events or I would see them out on the street, like I said, at different functions and just in different meetings. And, at first I thought it was only for women, like other people think. And no, it's all inclusive. And I think the origin story of the League of Women Voters is just, really beautiful. I was listening on NPR earlier today about Alice Paul and how, they did the first picket at the White House ever and got I believe it was the 19th Amendment passed, and just all the hard work they put into the movement to truly provide universal suffrage at that time. And I like the League of Women Voters because, in my opinion, it's just such a pure organization, nonpartisan. They have a really clear and focused goal. I've always enjoyed their voters guides. I used to pass out the voters guides back in 2014 with Mi Familia Vota in English and Spanish. I think they're very useful for the general community that they don't vote because they don't know who to vote for or what the issues are. And, they don't have the time or, don't want to take the time. They see it as too difficult to make a decision, or they see themselves as not knowledgeable or qualified enough to make a decision to vote. And I think that the League of Women's Voters Guide is extremely helpful. And, I just love that voters guide, and I love the League of Women Voters and their mission, like I mentioned.
My name is Catherine Summerlin. I am a first generation immigrant. I came from the island of Trinidad here with my family and settled in Pasadena. And as a result of my very modest upbringing, I learned that social justice issues were of a significant importance to me. And I've carried that forward in everything that I've done, especially as it relates to pursuing my master's in public administration. Underlying those that work with a sense of social equity is very much a part of who I am.
And how did you get involved with the League of Women Voters?
I actually have been a volunteer here and there with various organizations registering voters over the last 25 years. And I know that the League of Women Voters has been a huge presence in Houston. And after working in public service for, quite some time, I thought, you know what, I need to get back to my roots. I need to get to the point where I understand what the public wants, who they are, what is driving folks today, especially post George Floyd. And so the league presented a huge opportunity to me to really get back to my roots. And so I felt that this was an appropriate time to do that.
I am Lourdes Zavaleta. I am a journalist here in Houston, Texas. I work for a publication called Outsmart Magazine. It's an LGBTQ magazine. So yeah, that's what I do.
How did you get involved, or what interested you in the League of Women Voters? How long have you been a member?
So I have appreciated the work of the League for some time now. I actually first learned about the organization a few years ago through Outsmart. I work as an editor and a reporter, and one year we were working on some election coverage, and a local leader that I was interviewing recommended the League of Women Voters for a go-to for people to check out to see where candidates stand on certain issues. And then last summer, another local activist, Lou Weaver, who serves as the League of Women Voters of Houston's Rising Star co-chair, reached out to me about the opportunity to join Rising Stars, and I eagerly applied in hopes to help the League further its mission to strengthen civic engagement here in Houston.
All right, Catherine, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you, and how did you get involved with the League of Women Voters?
So I grew up in upstate New York. I've lived in a few different states, some easier to vote in than others. I moved to Texas about 7 years ago, and currently I own my own consulting firm where I do process safety consulting for oil and gas and petrochemical companies. And I think it started at a young age. When I turned 18, one of the first things I did was register to vote. And it's been kind of instilled in me from a young age that voting is important. And I've been following the League of Women Voters, but not really involved with them. I love the voting guide that they produce every year. I use that not only for my own reference, but trying to refer other people to that. And I love the whole idea of bipartisanship that the League has. And so I haven't really truly been involved until I applied for the Rising Stars program last year. And I applied because I think, that whole background of really being conscious of what's happening in my community and wanting to make a greater impact. And, as I said, I've lived in Houston for 7 years now, and I guess I'm finally ready to jump into Texas politics, if you will, and get more involved, especially after the last few years that have been a little questionable as far as involvement and normal people involvement, if you will. So I thought it was time to really jump in with both feet.
As part of the Rising Stars program, you have to do a project. Can you tell us about your project, what you're doing, and how you kind of developed it?
Yes, so there are 3 main focus areas that the Rising Stars are working on this year: environmental justice, criminal justice, and housing insecurity. I'm a part of the housing insecure group, and we're working to engage homeless and housing insecure Houstonians in the voting process by creating and distributing literature that informs people on their voting rights. And we're also hosting voter registration drives in areas where homeless people tend to congregate. I was interested in joining that group because I saw a crossover there between my work that I do at my day job and also the outreach that the Rising Stars group wanted to do. According to a University of Houston research, 25% of homeless youth in Houston identify as LGBTQ, And in addition to family rejection, LGBTQ youth can also end up on the streets due to harassment at school or abuse and neglect from state foster care agencies. And the Rising Stars Housing Insecure group wanted to provide voting access to all homeless people in Houston, and that includes the LGBTQ homeless population.
I think a lot of people are under the impression that homeless people, because they don't maybe have a fixed residence, aren't eligible to vote. How do you overcome that objection?
So that's actually not true, and that is one of the resources that we created. So we have an FAQ page on some things that people who are homeless or their advocates might have questions on. And when you register to vote, there is a question on there that asks you for an address. And that doesn't have to be a permanent address or the place that you're living. It just has to be somewhere where you tend to spend most of your time, and you can consider that your home. So a homeless person who wants to register to vote could put, for example, the street corner that they spend the most time at as their address and still be eligible to vote.
In some of our early days, first meetings as Rising Stars, we were encouraged to develop projects. And so we were doing some brainstorming, kind of throwing ideas out. And a number of us were really interested in better understanding the intersection of environmental and social issues, particularly in Harris County. And so we kind of threw that idea out there, and it rolled forward. And when we were meeting and refining that idea, because environmental issues can span a very wide range, we narrowed it down to more flooding related issues, and kind of formed a group called Environmental Justice out of that, with a focus on some of the flooding problems across Harris County. So that actually turned out to be a very timely topic. A lot of conversation has come up at the county level in the Commissioners Court meetings this year about big gaps that have happened in flood mitigation funding, particularly for BIPOC and LIC neighborhoods that are, typically lower income mixed neighborhoods, and they're just not seeing the same funding support as other communities across Harris County. So we've kind of done a number of different small projects to, dip our toes in the water and start expanding our influence and kind of making these connections with local groups. So we've really just recently started connecting with West Street Recovery, which is one of these groups that's active in Northeast Houston in the Greens and Halls Bayous, that is really on the ground there, building those connections with community members, trying to understand their needs, particularly in relation to kind of recovery after flooding. And then also trying to get these people motivated and inspired and trained to reach out and engage that first level of representation. So your commissioners locally, reaching out to judges, your mayor, and more getting involved. And so we've been able to attend some of those meetings, and we're set up to do some additional volunteer work with them so that we can kind of really understand the issues and learn what it is to be a part of that effort, which is particularly important to me as I feel a lot more separated from that. And I really want to understand and kind of dig into some of these issues and help where I can.
Thank you, Jack Enright, and last year's Rising Stars cohort for being on the show to talk about the program tonight. If you're interested, make sure you get in touch with us here at the League of Women Voters of Houston to sign up for this year's cohort. We'd love to have you. Thank you to Crystal Okorafor from the city of Houston for talking about One Safe Houston. It's almost voting season, and if you're wondering what you need to do to vote, take a look at this.
How to register to vote, Texas style, by the League of Women Voters of Texas.
How to check if you are registered to vote. Check your voter registration status at votetexas.gov, am I registered, or check with your county voter registrar. Who can register to vote in Texas? A citizen of the United States, a resident of the county, and 17 years and 10 months old. To vote, you must be 18 years old on election day. You must not have been declared mentally incapacitated by a court of law. If you have been convicted of a felony, you may register to vote only after you have completed the punishment phase of your conviction, including any terms of incarceration, parole, supervision, or period of probation ordered by the court. How do I register to vote in Texas? If you are a new Texas voter, print and fill out the voter registration form or pick one up at a library, government office, or high school. Fill out, sign, stamp, and mail in or turn it into your county election office. Call your county voter registrar and ask for a voter registration application to be mailed to you. Volunteer deputy registrars are certified by each county to help voters register to vote. Ask your local League of Women Voters for help.